channel explorator. If we travel from Delhi to Bombay by train, it will take us 19 hours and 45 minutes. But if we travel the same distance by aeroplane, it will take us only 2 hours and 10 minutes. So now we can understand how important this aircraft is. Not only its speed, but it gives more benefits in our life. Like aviation helps drive the development of the modern world. A network of airlines, airports and air traffic management organizations link major cities and small communities 24 hours a day with increasingly advanced aircraft. An enabler of tourism, 58% of all international tourists travel to their destination by air. Air transport allows people to have adventures in new countries, to build business relationships and to visit friends and family. As our economy grows ever more linked, aviation is the factor that brings people together. Today we will explore about who invented aeroplane and how many challenges they had to face. The first plane was invented in 1905. It was invented by Wright brothers of US. The Wright brothers were two of 5 siblings. Wilbur Wright was born on April 16, 1867 and Orville Wright was born on August 19, 1871 in a middle-class family. Wilbur and Orville Wright were the sons of Milton and Susan Wright and members of a warm, loving family that encouraged learning and doing. Milton was a bishop in United Brethren Church and was often away from home on church business. But he wrote hundreds of letters home and often brought back presents from his trips, exposing his children to the world beyond their horizon. In 1878, he brought home a rubber band powered helicopter, and young Wilbur and Orville immediately began to build copies of it. In 1884, Bishop Wright moved his family to Dayton, Ohio, the political center of the United Brethren Church. About the same time, his wife Susan fell ill with tuberculosis. Wilbur, just out of high school, put off college and nursed his sick mother. Orville began to lose interest in school and learned the printing business. Susan Wright died in the summer 1889. The same year, Orville dropped out of high school to open his own print shop. In 1890, Wilbur joined Orville in the printing business, serving as editor for the West Side News, a weekly newspaper for the West Dayton neighborhood. It was modestly successful and the brothers began a daily, the evening item, in 1891. However, they couldn't compete with larger, more established daily newspapers, and a few months they went back to being simple job printers. In 1894, Wilbur and Orville were caught up in the bicycling craze that swept the nation. To augment the income from their printing trade, they began repairing and selling bicycles. This soon grew into a full-time business, and in 1896, they began manufacturing their own bikes. The Wright Cycle Company returned a handsome profit, but the brothers cared little about money. They were already thinking about trading their wheels for wings. In 1896, the newspapers were filled with accounts of flying machines. Wilbur and Orville noticed that all these primitive aircraft lacked suitable controls. They began to wonder how a pilot might balance an aircraft in the air, just as a cyclist balances his bicycle on the road. In 1899, Wilbur devised a simple system that twisted or warped the wings of an airplane, causing it to roll right or left. They tested this system in a kite, then a series of gliders. They made their first test flights at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, on the shores of Atlantic where the strong winds helped them to launch the gliders and the soft sands helped to cushion the fall when they crashed. Their first two gliders, flown in 1900 and 1901, failed to perform as the Wrights had hoped. The gliders did not provide enough lift nor were they fully controllable. So during the winter of 1901 to 1902, Wilbur and Orville built a wind tunnel and conducted experiments to determine the best wing shape for an aeroplane. This enabled them to build a glider with sufficient lift and concentrate on the problem of control. Towards the end of 1902 flying season, their third glider became the first fully controllable aircraft with roll, pitch and yaw controls. During the winter of 1902 to 1903, with the help of their mechanic Charlie Taylor, the Wrights designed and built a gasoline engine light enough and powerful enough to propel an aeroplane. They also designed the first true airplane propeller and built a new powered aircraft. Back in Kitty Hawk, they suddenly found themselves in a race. Samuel P. Langley, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, had also built a powered aircraft. Patterned after a small unmanned aerodrome, he had flown successfully in 1896. To add to their frustration, the Wrights were delayed by problems with their propeller shafts and the weather, giving Langley time to test this aircraft twice in late 1903. Both attempts failed miserably, however, and Langley left the field to the Wrights. On December 17, 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright made the first sustained controlled flights in a powered aircraft. Back in Dayton, Ohio, the brothers found they had much to do to perfect their invention. While the 1903 Wright Flyer did indeed fly, it was underpowered and difficult to control. They established the world's first test flight facilities at Huffman Prairie, northeast of Dayton, today the site of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. For 2 years they made flight after flight, fine-tuning the controls, engine, propellers and configuration of the airplane. At first they could only fly in a straight line for less than a minute, but by the end of 1905 they were flying figure eights over Huffman Prairie, straying aloft for over half an hour or until their fuel ran out. The 1905 Wright Flyer was the world's first practical airplane. The invention of the airplane was a 6-year-long program lasting from 1899 to 1905. It began with the simple model glider which Wilbur Wright flew as a kite and ended with the development of the first practical airplane, the Wright Flyer 3. It's seen here over Huffman Prairie near Dayton, Ohio, with Orville at the controls. After the 1905 flying season, the Wrights contacted the United States War Department as well as governments and individuals in England, France, Germany and Russia, offering to sell a flying machine. They were turned down time and time again. Government bureaucrats thought they were crackpots. Others thought that if two bicycle mechanics could build a successful airplane, they could do it themselves. But the Wrights persisted, and in late 1907, the US Army's Signal Corps asked for an aircraft. Just a few months later, in early 1908, a French syndicate of businessmen agreed to purchase another. Both the US Army and the French asked for an airplane capable of carrying a passenger. The Wright brothers hastily adapted their 1905 Flyer with 2 seats and a more powerful engine. They tested these modifications in secret back at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina for the first time in several years. Then the brothers parted temporarily, Wilbur to France and Orville to Virginia. In 1908 and 1909, Wilbur demonstrated Wright aircraft in Europe and Orville flew in Fort Myer, Virginia. The flights went well until Orville lost a propeller and crashed, breaking his leg and killing his passenger L.T. Thomas Selfridge. While Orville recuperated, Wilbur kept flying in France, breaking record after record. Orville and his sister Kate eventually joined Wilbur in France, and the three returned home to Dayton to an elaborate homecoming celebration. Together, Orville and Wilbur returned to Fort Myer with a new military flyer and completed the U.S. Army trials. A few months later, Wilbur flew before over 1 million spectators in New York Harbor, his first public flight in his native land. All of these flights stunned and captivated the world. The Wright brothers became the first great celebrities of the 20th century. As their fame grew, orders for aircraft poured in. The Wrights set up airplane factories and flight schools on both sides of the Atlantic. Unfortunately, once they had demonstrated the aircraft in public, it was easy for others to copy them, and many did. The Wrights were dragged into time-consuming, energy-draining patent fights in Europe and America. The most bitter legal battle was with Glenn Curtiss, who, as part of his defense, borrowed Langley's unsuccessful aircraft from the Smithsonian Institution and rebuilt it to prove that the aerodrome could have flown before the Wright flyer. The ruse didn't work. Curtiss made too many modifications to get Langley's aircraft in the air, and the courts ruled in favor of the Wrights. Yet although the case resolved the Wright-Curtiss dispute, it left an enduring resentment between the Wrights and the Smithsonian. Outside the courtroom, the world seemed no friendlier to Wilbur and Orville. The aircraft business was uncertain and dangerous. Most of the money to be made was in exhibition flying, where the audiences wanted to see death-defying feats or airmanship. The Wrights sent out teams of pilots who had to fly increasingly higher, faster and more recklessly to satisfy the crowds. Inevitably, the pilots began to die in accidents, and the stress began to tell on the Wrights. Additionally, their legal troubles distracted them from what they were best at, invention and innovation. By 1911, Wright aircraft were no longer the best machines flying. In 1912, Wilbur Wright, worn out from legal and business problems, contracted typhoid and died. Orville, his heart no longer in the airplane business, sold the Wright Company in 1916 and went back to inventing. Patent fights and business troubles behind him, Orville Wright built a small laboratory in his Old West Dayton neighborhood. Here he contracted out as a consultant on a wide variety of engineering problems. He also took up a number of projects that caught his imagination. He did much aeronautical work, helping to develop a racing airplane, guided missile, and split flaps to help slow an aircraft in a dive. But he also worked on aerodynamic automobile designs, toy designs, and manufactured even a cipher machine for encoding communications. His fame as the co-inventor of the airplane endured, and he put it to good use. He was on the original board of National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics (NACA) and served longer than any board member since.
NSCA, which is now National Air and Space Administration or NASA. He helped oversee the Guggenheim Fund for the promotion of aeronautics, an effort that helped America recapture the technological lead in aviation during the late 1920s. He also worked tirelessly to help unknown inventors bring their ideas to market. And he continued a long-running battle with the Smithsonian that had begun with their duplicity in the Curtiss patent suit. After the First World War, the Smithsonian exaggerated Langley's contributions to aeronautics while seeming to belittle the Wrights. Friends of Orville set the record straight, but the Smithsonian kept on. In retaliation, Orville sent the 1903 Wright Flyer, the airplane in which he and Wilbur had made the first powered flights at Kitty Hawk, to the Kensington Science Museum of London in England. In the 1930s, Charles Lindbergh, the first aviator to fly from New York to Paris non-stop, attempted to mediate the feud, but to no avail. It wasn't until 1942 that Orville Wright's friend and biographer Fred Kelly convinced the Smithsonian to back down and publish the truth. That done, Orville sent word to England that the flyer was to be brought home to America. Its return was delayed by the Second World War, but it was finally returned in 1948. Orville's last big project was fittingly an aircraft. He helped to rebuild the 1905 Flyer 3, the first practical airplane, which he and Wilbur had perfected at Huffman Prairie. This was put on display at Deeds Carillon Park in Dayton, Ohio, in 1950, but Orville did not live to see the ceremony. He suffered a heart attack in 1948 after fixing the doorbell at his home and died a few days later.
So friends, we can understand now how much they had to struggle for their invention. And we can also understand that failure does not matter. Only hard work leads us to success. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more videos and don't forget to comment. Thank you.